I don't understand how you could claim to be doing a rhetorical analysis of this thing and also make all of the errors and mistakes that you made. He didn't say all trans. He didn't say that. You're saying that. He didn't say all trans people are violent. See, I told you this at the beginning. I said he'd do it. I called it.
These were committed by white lonely men.
And the curious timing of this attack is that it coincides within a few days of a planned national event called the Trans Day of Vengeance. According to a national group contacted at Our Rights DC, April 1st will be the Trans Day of Vengeance to stop the trans genocide, allegedly.
Again, why is Michael bringing this up? We haven't established that the killer's trans identity is the cause.
No, but he's exploring the possibility. And in exploring that motive, as a potentiality, this would be a potentially be a bit of supporting evidence. Why wouldn't he bring it up? Like, if you were saying this school shooter was theoretically a white supremacist. We're not sure yet, but it's one of the plausible theories. And then you realize that day was on the internet, like some white supremacist national day of like vengeance or retribution. That's okay. That's relevant to talk about, right? Because that has to do with motive. It's a bit of evidence towards a potential motive. It's okay.
I'm only going to say this one more time, sir. Calm down.
And yet Michael has brought up an instance of another school shooter whose motive did relate to trans identity. And now he's conflating this all with an event.
No, he's not. He didn't conflate the earlier one with this. That's not true. Conflating this all? No. Conflating... He's conflating, actually. He's conflating because he thinks Michael is connecting both of the trans shooters to this. He's actually only doing one.
I will make that hypocrisy hurt.
And it's not really conflation. It's just curious coincidence is what he's actually saying as a potential bit of evidence. That's not a conflation. It's basic logical maneuver.
That is set to take place on April 1st. Yeah, April 1st. From a group with just 1,300 Twitter followers. Assuming that it's not an April...
Okay, that particular post is from just that account, but I knew about this and I don't follow that account. I knew about this in advance. If you're in political circles on Twitter, you probably heard about this. Not supposed to be talking about substance. We are undisciplined. I'm sorry. He's rubbing off on me, guys. I'm very sorry.
Congratulations. You played yourself.
It's just, some of these arguments just are weird. Like, they're just weird. Like, I'm not telling you whether or not he's right. I think Michael made some slips here. I already told you that. But that's like a weird point.
Fool's joke. This is hardly a national event, is it?
Well, it's meant to be national, and I heard about it.
This is nothing more than fear-mongering from Michael. He's bolstering his narrative that trans people are violent.
What is the...
It depends on how you define fear-mongering. I will say that this is casting Michael in a not great light, and I don't think you need to. It's a potential motive based on the trans identity. Bit of evidence that would support this potential motive that he brings up. You can call that fear-mongering if you want, but that is a insanely low bar. If that's your bar for what fear-mongering is giving offering a bit of evidence when discussing a potential theory for a motive, which, by the way, you still have not definitively said that you think happened, by the way. That's a very low bar for fear-mongering, man. Like, bro.
I'm only going to say this one more time, sir. Calm down.
Mongering from Michael. He's bolstering his narrative that trans people are violent.
He didn't say all trans. He didn't say that. You're saying that. He didn't say all trans people are violent. He didn't. I mean, I guess he's saying trans people are violent just in the same way that all human beings are violent and can be violent, but he's never said that all people are this way. And also, again, by saying, but he did say that the ideology might increase it. I get what he's saying. I get what he's saying, but again, there's just slight inaccuracies in terms of summation of what the other guy is saying, and they're just building up and they're getting a little bit annoying. So when he says, hold on, let's hear that again.
Fear-mongering from Michael. He's bolstering his narrative that trans people are violent.
What is the
fair play to Mr. Rationality Rules on this one? He is saying that this particular trans person was being indicated by violence, and he does believe that transgender ideology lends to this sort of anger. He's not saying that all trans people are violent. He's not saying that they are violent inherently. He just thinks the ideology lends to violence. Those are his premises. So, but again, the bar for fear-mongering, his bar for fear-mongering is very low.
The trans genocide, quote unquote, the trans genocide is a fable made up by disturbed people to justify violence against conservatives and Christians and normal people who understand that men and women are different and don't think that we should let men enter into the women's locker room and strip down naked.
Again, I'm not here to talk about transgender rights, nor the...
Really?
Are you sure about that?
I don't know. I feel like you've been defending them on substance quite a bit here.
tiny Twitter group's choice of language. I'm here to point out narrative control. Michael is, yet again, making out that trans people, all trans people...
Wrong.
He did not say that. Didn't say that. He said transgenocide was made up by disturbed individuals. He did not say that transgenocide is something that all transgender people believe in. They don't. Let's put it that way. There's very prominent transgender individuals who kind of go under a conservative label, who do not believe in this sort of thing. So no, he's not saying that. When he's saying disturbed individuals who came up with the idea of transgenocide, he's not saying all trans people fall under this banner. He did not say that.
Deal with it.
Michael is, yet again, making out that trans people, all trans people, are violent towards conservatives and Christians and normal people.
He said that the narrative of transgenocide is an incentive or an example of stochastic terrorism, which is an idea that people on the left love to use, by the way, is an incentive or an example of stochastic terrorism or a dog whistle or what have you for violence against people who do not believe in transgenderism as an ideology, as Knowles would define it. He's not saying that all trans people believe this. He's not saying that all trans people came up with this, despite what Mr. Rationality Rules is saying. He's not saying what you said that he's saying. And also, accusing people of doing a genocide against you, as far as motives go, or as far as examples of stochastic terrorism go, that's not that far-fetched. Again, I don't really love stochastic terrorism as a concept in general, and Knowles is using it here. And I understand that they don't mean genocide in the literal sense. That's an example of semantic overload. We'll talk about that too. There's a whole bunch of rhetorical just muck around this. Just a lack of good faith interpretation, semantic overload, stochastic terrorism. It's very difficult to parse through, honestly. But let's just say that what Rationality Rules is saying Michael Knowles is saying is not what Michael Knowles is saying. And you can read and you can tell because you can actually just watch the video.
He's just trotting out the tired rhetoric of naked men walking around in the women's locker room. It's yet more fear-mongering. It's yet more demonizing of a struggling minority.
The concern of biological men in women's restrooms is a very normal concern that a lot of people have, not just conservatives. If that's your bar for fear-mongering, again, your definition of fear-mongering is so low that I barely care about the word when you use it. Because that's a concern that, like, at least half the country has. Probably a lot more. Yeah, man. You're devaluing the word fear-mongering the more you talk.
Group is run not just by completely fringe lunatics. Well, they might also be fringe lunatics, but some of them have had mainstream jobs. The group is run in part by a former Democrat staffer.
And again, more of the same. Conflation, conflation, conflation.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
What?
By Michael's rhetoric, we can label all Christians mentally ill and vile every time.
So it's interesting. Rationality Rules loves to accuse the Daily Wire and people on it of, like, nut picking, of, like, taking people who are, like, kind of fringe examples and, like, using them as an example of the whole. Knowles is, like, specifically defending against nut picking, saying, hey, this kind of crazy thing is supported by some semi-mainstream people. Look at that. Isn't that somewhat concerning? And now he's calling it conflation. Pick a lane, man. Jesus.
Come on, man.
Rhetoric, we can label all Christians mentally ill and vile every time the Westboro Baptist Church pickers a funeral.
I don't know what that word means. Peckers a funeral. I'm gonna assume it's something bad. Yeah, that's a horrible analogy. Actually, the more I think about it, what's more similar? One of the leaders of that weird church also happens to be in the halls of government or something, or one of the leaders of that weird church is like a personality, like just some connection between the weirdness in the church and the mainstream is a more accurate analogy. That analogy does not make as much sense as he wants it to at all. And also, even if it did, it's fine. It's not the end of the world.
And they feel really angry. Jeffrey Marsh, who is this transgender identifying social media person who speaks directly to children and asks little children to message him so they can talk about sex together.
What the fuck does this have to do with the shooting?
If you didn't cut him off 3 seconds through, maybe you would find out.
Michael is just getting off and hating trans people.
What? What the fuck?
He's hating this individual person for behavior. He doesn't like what this particular person is doing, like behaviorally. He probably wouldn't like if the person was straight either. Buddy.
Isn't journalism. This is the Daily Wire.
You're right. It's not just journalism. It's also commentary. Because he's a political commentator. Because there's both. You can have both, you see. And I don't know, to my mind, it's pretty clear when he's reporting a fact and when he's giving commentary. Like, why? See, I told you this at the beginning. I said he'd do it. I called it. I don't know how long this video is. This video is probably embarrassingly long. We talked about this. I told you right at the beginning. I called it. I said, he's probably going to refer back to that journalistic framework earlier. And now, 17, 18 minutes later, he did it. Daily Wire. It's not journalism. You're right. It's the Daily Wire. Because the Daily Wire is both news reporting and news commentary. And to spin that like it's pretending to be pure journalism is ridiculous. It's like, dude, you do the same thing. You have the same job.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
In a lot of ways. You also give commentary, and you also are trying to report some of the facts. Like, calm down, dude. Mountains out of molehills. Again, that might be the most consistent theme, other than assumption of premises.
We don't know the specific drugs that this person may or may not have been on. We don't know the psychiatric help that this person may or may not, almost certainly did not receive. We do not know the nature of the person's family or community or hatred of Christianity, perhaps, if it's targeting a Christian school. We don't.
Right, and by the way, that's all relevant to the school. For those of you who are lost about why he's talking about Christianity so much, that's why it was a Christian school.
I don't know any of that. We do know that this stuff is demonic. We do know that.
Ah, yes, this rant wouldn't be complete without slipping in at the end Christianity somehow being oppressed.
What?
Oppressed. Right.
Without slipping in at the end. I mean, in this instance, it was Christian kids who got shot. So I feel like he's not slipping it in. I feel like that's kind of the whole thing, dude.
You haven't been paying attention.
They were oppressed in this instance. They got shot. So I don't think he's like slipping that in. I think that's pretty evident. I also don't know what he said there that makes you say something like that. He just said it was demonic.
Right. By his own words, everything Michael said is bullshit. He knows
I don't know where he got that from.
nothing, and yet rather than reporting the tragic event...
Right, he knows nothing for sure. He reported on the tragic event. There wasn't a lot to say because he didn't know anything for sure. So then he talked about what he thought. He brought in some evidence that he thought might be relevant. He speculated as to some theories, like in not the wildest fashion that I could imagine. And he's a commentator.
Then he's taken an opportunity to denigrate a portion of people based on them sharing one trait in common with the perpetrator. The issues that lead to tragedies, such as the one we've just seen, where 6 people lost their lives, are far more complex than the one-sided, single-issue excuse for reporting that the Daily Wire propaganda machine...
What?
He didn't say it was the only potential motive. He listed like 4 things. He listed social isolation, psychiatric meds, family structure. He listed like 5 things. He said we didn't know any of these. He said the only thing we do know is about the identity, so he mostly talked about that. But he listed like 5 other things. I do not understand how you could have watched the same video clips I did, Mr. Rationality Rules, and be saying the things you're saying. Because he talked about other stuff. He mentioned other stuff. You actually got mad at him for pulling threads out of his backside earlier.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Dude.
Sided, single-issue excuse for reporting that the Daily Wire propaganda machine...
It's reporting, and it's also commentary. It's not meant to be exclusive. Again, at the final bell, at the very end of this video, I called it back to the framework at the beginning. It's a framework that was never valid to begin with.
Portrays. Demonization of entire groups always leads to more suffering.
He's assuming his own premises because when he says groups, he thinks about groups and people in terms of people with irrevocable characteristics. When Michael Knowles refers to this group, he's considering this an ideology or a mental disorder that has a direct implication on behavior to a vast extent. And he's also not said that every individual who identifies as transgender presents the same risk as any other. He's not saying that. He didn't say that.
You haven't been paying attention.
I know you want him to be saying things that he's not saying. I know that's easier, and I don't think you're doing this on purpose, and I'm trying not to be like a dick, but dude, people watching, he did not say what Rationality Rules said that he was saying in like 90% of those cases.
Demonization of entire groups always leads to more suffering.
Look, 90% of the times you characterize his arguments as things he didn't actually say. In the video, you told me he would make a definitive declaratory link between this motive theory and the definitive motive. He never did that. You told me he'd do that. He never do that. In various opportunities, you assumed your own premises when interpreting his argument, and then did a lot of the things that you accused him of doing. And you referenced a framework for how you were evaluating this show that was never valid to begin with, because it's both journalism and commentary. I don't understand how you could claim to be doing a rhetorical analysis of this thing and also make all of the errors and mistakes that you made. And I'm assuming that they are errors, because I don't really want to assume that they're intentional, and you seem like a nice guy. By the way, it's possible that I've made similar errors in this video, and for that I am very sorry. I am only human, but I tried real hard to avoid it. I know it would be easier if he was making the arguments that you say that he was making, but he's not. He's really not. Sorry. Sorry.